control means holding yourself back. They imagine a clenched jaw, swallowed anger, forced silence, but that idea is wrong. Real self-control is not about pressure. It is about freedom. It is the quiet ability to stay steady when everything around you is trying to pull you off center. There was a time in my life when I believed reacting fast meant being strong. When someone challenged me, I responded immediately. When something felt unfair, I spoke before I thought. When emotions rose, I let them decide for me. I told myself this was honesty. I told myself this was confidence. In reality, I was just untrained. I remember one moment clearly. A simple comment from someone close to me triggered a reaction that lasted days. Not because the comment was powerful, but because I had no space between feeling and action. That moment didn't ruin my life. But moments like that, repeated over years, quietly shaped it. If you have ever sent a message you later regretted, raised your voice when silence would have served you better, or replayed a conversation in your head wishing you had stayed calm, you already understand the cost of losing control. It is exhausting, it drains your energy, and over time it erodes your trust in yourself. Here is the truth most people never hear. Calm is not a personality trait. It is a skill. And like any skill, it can be trained. The strongest people I know are not the loudest. They are not the most reactive. They are the ones who can pause. They feel everything, yet they are not ruled by what they feel. They do not rush to defend their ego. They do not need to win every moment. Their power comes from choice. Their self-control does not mean suppressing who you are. It means deciding who gets access to your energy. It means choosing dignity over impulse, clarity over chaos, and long-term peace over short-term relief. This shift may sound small, but it changes how you move through every relationship, every challenge, and every decision you make. This audiobook is not about becoming cold or detached. It is about learning how to stay grounded in moments that usually control you. It is about training your mind to remain calm under pressure, clear under stress, and steady in uncertainty. Not because life becomes easier, but because you become stronger. Over the next chapters, we will break self-control down into simple skills. You will hear real situations. Moments of anger, tension, disappointment, and pressure. You will see how control is built quietly through small daily choices, not dramatic transformations. This training begins with awareness and repetition. This is not a motivational talk. It is a training. A reminder that every reaction is a practice and every pause is a chance to reclaim your power. You do not need to change who you are. You need to train how you respond. If you are ready to stop being controlled by fleeting emotions, if you want to build a calm and unbreakable mind that serves you in real life, stay with this video. And if you know someone who is struggling, someone who reacts before they choose and pays the price later, share this video with them. It might be exactly what they need to begin improving their life. Chapter 1. Why most people lose control without knowing it. Most people believe they lose control because something big happens, a betrayal, a major conflict, a serious failure. But in reality, self-control is rarely lost in dramatic moments. It is lost quietly in small reactions that feel insignificant at the time. It happens when you read a message and immediately feel tension rise in your chest. When a comment feels slightly disrespectful and your mood shifts. When you replay a conversation in your head, not because it mattered, but because it touched something unresolved inside you. These moments seem harmless. They pass quickly, and because nothing visibly explodes, we assume there is no damage. But this is where control is slowly handed away. I used to think I had good emotional control. I didn't yell often, and I didn't get into constant arguments. From the outside, I seemed calm, but inside, I was constantly reacting. A look, a tone, a delay in response would change my internal state. My body stayed quiet, but my mind was restless. The problem was not that I felt emotions. The problem was that I let them decide what happened next. You may recognize this in someone close to you, a family member who insists they are just being honest, but every honest reaction creates tension. A friend who says they are passionate, yet always seems drained after interactions. Or a colleague who reacts defensively to small feedback and then wonders why people stop trusting them. They don't see themselves as losing control. They see themselves as being real, being expressive, being true to who they are. But the truth is harder to accept. What looks like personality is often just untrained reaction. Most people are not consciously choosing their responses. They are following patterns that were never examined. The tone they grew up around, the way conflict was handled in their environment, the habits they formed long before they had language for self-control. This is why losing control feels automatic, because it is. Here is the pattern most people live inside without noticing. Something happens. A trigger appears. The body reacts before the mind has a chance to catch up. Emotion rises. Words follow, or silence follows, heavy with resentment. Either way, the moment passes, but the residue remains. Over time, this residue builds. You start to feel tired after conversations. You avoid certain people. You replay moments late at night. Don't you tell yourself you should just let things go? But you don't know how. I once watched a close friend repeat this cycle for years. He was intelligent, capable, and deeply caring. But he had one habit that controlled his life. He reacted instantly when he felt challenged. Not loudly, not aggressively, but with sharp words and rigid certainty. Every disagreement turned into a quiet battle. Every conversation became a test of who was right. Over time, people stopped engaging openly with him. Not because they disliked him, but because they didn't feel safe around his reactions. When he finally noticed the pattern, his question was simple. Why does this keep happening when I don't mean any harm? The answer was uncomfortable. Because intention does not matter when reactions lead. Most people believe control is about strength. It's about overpowering emotion, but self-control has nothing to do with force. It has to do with awareness. If you are unaware of what triggers you, you cannot choose differently. You will react first and explain later. This is why people often regret their reactions only after the moment has passed. When the emotion fades, clarity returns. You see what you could have said, what you should have done. But by then, the opportunity to act with control is gone. The loss of control is not the emotion itself. It is the absence of space. Between what happens and what you do next, there is supposed to be a gap. A brief moment where awareness steps in and choice becomes possible. For most people, that gap does not exist. Or if it does, it is so small they never notice it. They live reaction to reaction, thinking this is normal. It is common, but it is not inevitable. Think about the last time you felt emotionally hijacked. It might not have been dramatic. Maybe it was irritation that lingered longer than it should have. Maybe it was defensiveness when someone questioned you. Maybe it was the urge to prove a point that didn't actually matter. Ask yourself this honestly. Did you choose that reaction? Or did it happen to you? This question matters because it changes how you see yourself. When you believe you are choosing, you defend the behavior. When you see that you are reacting, you gain the power to train something new. Self-control begins with noticing patterns, not judging them. There is no weakness in realizing you have been operating on autopilot. Autopilot is how most humans survive. It is efficient, it saves energy, but it also hands your life over to old programming. And old programming does not care about your long-term peace. The mind is designed to protect, not to guide. It reacts quickly to perceived threats, even when the threat is only emotional. A tone of voice, a delayed reply, a look that feels dismissive. Your nervous system does not distinguish between physical danger and social discomfort. It reacts the same way. This is why control feels so difficult. You are not fighting logic. You are interrupting instinct. The good news is this: instinct can be trained, but before training begins, awareness must come first. You cannot control what you refuse to see. And most people refuse to see how often they give their power away in ordinary moments. Control is not lost in chaos. It is lost in familiarity. This chapter is not meant to make you feel guilty. It is meant to make you conscious, because the moment you see the pattern clearly, it stops owning you completely. Over the next chapters, you will learn how to build that missing space, how to slow reactions without suppressing yourself, how to stay present when emotions rise instead of being carried by them. But for now, your only task is this: pay attention. Notice what triggers you today. Not to fix it, not to judge it, just to see it. Awareness is the first form of self-control.
Chapter 2. Calm is a skill, not a personality. Many people believe calmness is something you are either born with or not. They look at someone who stays composed under pressure and assume that person is naturally wired that way.
That's just their personality, they say. And when they compare themselves, they quietly conclude, I'm just not built like that. This belief is comforting because it removes responsibility. If calm is a trait, then losing control is not something you can change. It becomes an excuse that feels reasonable and permanent. But this belief is false. Calm is not a personality. Calm is a skill. And like every skill, it looks effortless only after it has been practiced. I once worked closely with someone who completely changed the way I understood this. When I first met him, he was reactive in subtle but constant ways. Meetings made him tense. Feedback made him defensive. Delays irritated him more than he admitted. He wasn't aggressive or loud, but you could feel his inner friction. His mind was always slightly on edge. What stood out was not his lack of intelligence or discipline. He was competent and hardworking. What he lacked was emotional training. Every stressful moment pulled him into reaction before he could catch himself. Months later, the change was undeniable. His voice slowed, his presence softened. He listened more than he spoke. When things went wrong, he did not rush to explain or justify. He paused, and that pause changed everything. Nothing external in his life had dramatically improved. His work was still demanding. His responsibilities had not disappeared. What changed was his relationship with his internal state. He trained it. The idea that calm people are simply built different ignores a basic truth. No one is born knowing how to manage emotional pressure. We learn patterns from our environment. We absorb reactions before we ever question them. And unless we intentionally retrain them, those patterns stay with us. This is why calmness often feels inaccessible, because it was never modeled, practiced, or reinforced. Think about how most people are taught to deal with emotion. Don't be angry. Calm down. Let it go. These are commands, not skills. They tell you what not to feel, but never teach you what to do when the feeling arrives. So when stress hits, the body reacts as it always has. Tight chest, racing thoughts, urge to respond, and because no alternative has been trained, the reaction feels inevitable. But inevitability is an illusion created by repetition. What looks like personality is often just a habit repeated long enough to feel natural. Calm people are not immune to emotion. They feel irritation, fear, disappointment, and pressure just like everyone else. The difference is not in what they feel, but in what they do next. They have practiced staying present inside discomfort. This is where many people misunderstand self-control. They imagine calmness as suppression, as holding emotions down until they disappear. But suppression creates tension, not control. Suppressed emotions leak out in other ways: sarcasm, withdrawal, passive resistance, exhaustion. True calm is not about pushing emotions away. It is about allowing them to exist without giving them the steering wheel. This distinction matters, because when you stop trying to eliminate emotion, you can start training your response to it. The person I mentioned earlier did not become calm by avoiding stress. He became calm by repeatedly choosing to slow down when stress appeared. At first, it was awkward. His pauses felt unnatural. His silence felt uncomfortable. But over time, that discomfort became familiar, and familiarity reduced fear. This is how skills are built, through repetition in small moments. Calmness is not achieved in crisis. It is trained in ordinary situations, when the stakes are low, when the irritation is mild, when the urge to react is present but manageable. Most people wait for a big emotional test to be calm. That is like trying to lift heavy weight without ever training with lighter ones. Training requires structure, and the first structure is recognizing that calm is something you practice, not something you summon. You don't wait to feel calm before acting. You act in ways that cultivate calm, even while discomfort is present. This may sound simple, but it challenges a deep assumption. Many people believe their internal state must change before their behavior can change. In reality, behavior is often what reshapes the internal state. When you slow your breathing, your nervous system receives a signal of safety. When you pause before speaking, your mind has a moment to reorganize. When you choose not to react immediately, you weaken the habit of impulsive response. None of these actions require you to feel calm first. They create calm as a byproduct. This is why calm is a skill. Skills do not depend on mood, they depend on practice. You do not wait to feel confident before learning to drive. You practice driving until confidence emerges. Emotional control works the same way. You practice regulated behavior until regulated emotion follows. One of the most powerful shifts you can make is to stop identifying with your reactions. Instead of saying, "I'm an impatient person," you begin to say, "I've practiced impatience." This subtle change opens the door to retraining. If something was practiced, it can be practiced differently. This reframing removes shame. It replaces self-judgment with curiosity. Instead of asking, "What is wrong with me?" you ask, "What have I been training without realizing it?" Every time you interrupt someone, every time you send a message without rereading it, every time you mentally rehearse arguments instead of letting them pass, these are all forms of training. The question is not whether you are training your mind. You are. The question is what you are training it to do. Calm people have trained themselves to tolerate the moment between impulse and action. That moment is uncomfortable at first. It feels like uncertainty, like loss of control. But it is actually where control is born. When you stay with that discomfort instead of escaping it through reaction, something shifts. The urgency fades. The emotion loses intensity. Choice becomes possible. This does not happen once. It happens hundreds of times. And this is why calmness becomes reliable. Not because the person is special, but because the nervous system has learned a new pattern. If you want to begin this training, start small. Choose one daily situation that usually triggers mild irritation, a delay, a minor disagreement, a moment of inconvenience. When it happens, do not aim to be calm. Aim to pause. Pause long enough to notice your body, the tension, the impulse, the urge to act. Then choose a response that is slightly slower than your habit. That is all. You're not trying to be perfect. You are building repetition. Over time, the pause lengthens, the urgency softens, the space grows, and slowly, what once felt impossible begins to feel natural. Calm stops being something you admire in others. It becomes something you live inside yourself, not because of who you are, but because of what you train. Chapter 3. The space between emotion and action. There is a moment most people never notice. It is brief, quiet, almost invisible, and yet it is where all self-control lives. That moment exists between what you feel and what you do next. Most people believe emotions cause actions. They say, "I was angry, so I reacted," or "I felt hurt, so I said something." But this is not entirely true. Emotion does not force action, it creates pressure. What turns pressure into behavior is the absence of space. When there is no space, reaction feels automatic. When space exists, choice becomes possible. I learned this lesson the hard way. There was a time when a single sentence from someone I cared about could derail my entire day. It wasn't an insult. It wasn't even meant to hurt, but it touched something unresolved in me. Before I realized what was happening, my tone changed. My body tensed. My mind started building arguments. I responded quickly, not because I had something wise to say, but because silence felt unbearable. Hours later, clarity returned. I knew exactly what I should have done. I should have paused. I should have listened. I should have said nothing at all, but the moment had already passed. That gap between knowing and doing was the space I hadn't learned to inhabit yet. Most people experience this gap only in hindsight. They see it after the reaction, when emotion has already burned through. But with training, you begin to notice it before action takes place. This is the most important skill in self-control. The space between emotion and action is not calm at first. It is uncomfortable. It feels like tension with nowhere to go. Your body wants relief. Your mind wants resolution. Reaction promises both, even if only briefly. That is why people react. Reacting feels like release, but release is not resolution. It is escape. When you react immediately, the emotion does not disappear. It simply moves outward. It enters your words, your tone, your posture. And once it is expressed, it cannot be taken back. The consequences may be subtle or severe, but they are always real. Staying in the space feels harder in the moment, but it protects you from damage later. The mistake most people make is thinking that the goal of self-control is to eliminate emotion. It is not. Emotion will rise whether you want it to or not. The goal is to increase the distance between emotion and action, even by a second. 1 second is enough. In that second, awareness can step in. And awareness does not argue with emotion. It observes it. It notices where the feeling lives in the body, the tightness in the chest, the heat in the face, the pressure behind the eyes. By noticing these sensations, you interrupt the automatic loop. This is not a spiritual idea. It is physiological. When you notice sensation without acting on it, the nervous system begins to regulate itself. The intensity peaks and then slowly declines. The urge to react weakens, and as it weakens, your options expand. This is why calm people appear unshaken, not because they do not feel emotion, but because they allow it to move through them without turning it into action. I once saw this in a colleague during a high-pressure situation. A project had failed. Deadlines were missed. Everyone in the room was tense. Accusations hovered beneath the surface. And in moments like this, reactions usually take over. People defend themselves. Voices rise. Blame spreads. But he did something different. When criticism came his way, he did not respond immediately. He did not explain or justify. He sat still. He listened. There was a pause long enough to feel uncomfortable. That pause changed the entire room. Instead of escalating, the conversation slowed. The tension softened. Others followed his pace without realizing it. When he finally spoke, his words were simple and precise. No emotion leaked into them, no defense, just clarity. Later, I asked him how he stayed so composed. He didn't say he felt calm. He said he felt everything. He just didn't act on it. That distinction is everything. The space between emotion and action is not created by willpower. It is created by familiarity. The more often you stay in that space, the less threatening it feels. Over time, the nervous system learns that it is safe to pause. This is why repetition matters more than insight. You can understand this concept intellectually and still fail to apply it, because in the moment of emotional charge, understanding disappears. Only trained behavior remains. Training begins by practicing in low-stakes situations, when the emotion is mild, when the trigger is familiar, when the consequences are small. This might be a minor annoyance, a delayed response, a comment that slightly irritates you. These moments are your training ground. When one appears, your only goal is to notice the impulse to act, not to suppress it, not to judge it, just to see it. Then, you delay action by a few seconds. You breathe. You stay present. You let the sensation rise and fall without feeding it. This is the practice. Most people underestimate how powerful this is because it looks simple. But simplicity does not mean ease. It means precision. Every time you stay in the space instead of reacting, you weaken the old pattern. You teach your nervous system that urgency is not authority, that emotion can exist without command. At first, the space feels unstable, like standing on one foot after years of leaning. But with repetition, balance improves. What once felt like effort begins to feel natural. This is how control becomes reliable. One of the most common fears people have is that if they do not react, they will be ignored, disrespected, or taken advantage of. This fear is understandable. Many people equate silence with weakness, but silence is only weakness when it is avoidance. When silence is chosen from awareness, it carries strength. A reaction driven by emotion often communicates insecurity. A response chosen after a pause communicates confidence. People feel the difference. This does not mean you never speak up. It means when you do, your words are not hijacked by impulse. They are guided by intention. The space gives you access to that intention. It allows you to ask a simple question before acting. Is this response aligned with who I want to be? Without space, this question never appears. With space, it becomes automatic. This chapter is about reclaiming that space. Not once, not occasionally, but consistently. You will not succeed every time. No one does. There will be moments when emotion moves faster than awareness. That is part of training. The goal is not perfection. The goal is progress. Each pause counts. Each moment of restraint builds capacity. Each time you choose not to react, you strengthen the part of you that leads instead of follows. As you move forward, remember this. Self-control is not about controlling emotion. It is about creating enough space to decide what deserves your action. That space is your power, and the more often you step into it, the more unbreakable your mind becomes. Chapter 4. Training self-control. In small daily moments, most people believe self-control is something you use only when life becomes intense, a confrontation, a crisis, a major decision. They imagine discipline as a tool reserved for serious situations. But this belief quietly sabotages progress. Self-control is not built in emergencies. It is built in ordinary moments that seem too small to matter. The way you respond to a minor inconvenience, the way you handle being interrupted, the way you react when something does not go your way. These moments shape your mind far more than rare dramatic events. I once noticed this in someone very close to me. On the surface, they were calm. They didn't explode. They didn't create obvious conflict. But throughout the day, they reacted to small frustrations constantly. Traffic made them tense. Waiting irritated them. Minor mistakes lingered in their mind long after they happened. Nothing serious ever occurred. Yet by the end of each day, they were exhausted. When I asked them why they felt so drained, They couldn't point to a single cause. That was the problem. The fatigue didn't come from one big event. It came from hundreds of small, unexamined reactions. Each reaction consumed a little energy. Each irritation pulled attention outward. Each moment of resistance trained the nervous system to stay alert. Self-control training begins when you realize that the mind is always learning, even when you are not paying attention. Every small reaction is a repetition. If you react with irritation to small delays, you are training impatience. If you mentally argue with every inconvenience, you are training resistance. Even if you carry frustration forward instead of releasing it, you are training tension. The mind does not care whether the situation is important. It only cares about frequency. This is why calm people focus on the small moments. They understand that mastery is not about heroic restraint. It is about consistency in the mundane. One of the most powerful shifts you can make is to stop waiting for important situations to practice control. Instead, you begin using daily life as your training ground. Consider moments that normally pass without reflection. Standing in line, being corrected, being misunderstood, dealing with slow systems or unresponsive people. These moments are usually dismissed as annoyances, but they are precisely where discipline can be built without pressure. When the stakes are low, awareness is easier. You are not overwhelmed. You are not emotionally flooded. You have just enough space to notice your response and gently redirect it. This is where training becomes sustainable. I remember deciding to treat these moments differently for the first time. Instead of trying to control my reactions during intense conversations, I chose one simple practice. I would not react immediately to small frustrations. When the internet was slow, I noticed the urge to complain. When plans changed, I noticed the urge to resist. When something felt inefficient, I noticed the tightening in my body. And instead of feeding those reactions, I paused. Not dramatically, not perfectly, just enough to interrupt the pattern. At first, the urge didn't disappear, but something else happened. The urgency softened. The moment passed without leaving residue. Knowing that small success made the next pause easier. This is how training works. It compounds quietly. Many people avoid practicing self-control in small moments because they believe it doesn't matter. But the mind does not differentiate between small and large reactions. It only recognizes patterns. If you train calm in small moments, calm shows up when you need it. If you ignore small moments, you reinforce habits that will surface under pressure. This is why people often lose control in big situations. They never practiced control when it was easy. Training self-control in daily life does not mean becoming passive or indifferent. It means choosing where to place your attention and energy. One helpful question is simple. Is this moment worth my reaction? Most of the time, the answer is no. Not every inconvenience deserves engagement. Not every irritation requires commentary. Not every internal response needs to be followed. By choosing not to react, you are not ignoring reality. You are preserving clarity. Another important aspect of small moment training is learning to release tension quickly. Many people do not realize how long they carry minor frustrations. A brief annoyance in the morning can quietly shape the entire day if it is not released. Self-control includes letting go. When something minor triggers you, practice noticing when the emotion has peaked. Feel it soften. Allow it to pass without replaying the story. This teaches the mind that emotions do not need to be held to be processed. Letting go is a skill, and like all skills, it improves with use. You may notice resistance at first. The mind often believes that holding on to irritation is protective, as if staying tense prevents future discomfort. But this belief is outdated. Tension does not protect, it drains. The more you practice releasing small tensions, the more resilient your system becomes. Over time, you will notice a shift. Situations that once irritated you barely register. Not because you suppress them, but because your nervous system no longer treats them as threats. This is the true benefit of small moment training. It reduces baseline stress. Calm becomes your default, not because life becomes smoother, but because you stop adding unnecessary friction. One of the most valuable outcomes of this practice is trust in yourself. When you consistently choose not to react, you begin to trust your ability to handle discomfort. This trust reduces anxiety. You are no longer afraid of how you might respond. You know you can pause. That knowledge is grounding. If you want to begin this practice, start with one simple commitment. Choose a single daily situation that usually causes mild irritation. It might be waiting, being interrupted, or dealing with inefficiency. When it happens, your only task is to notice the urge to react and delay action by a few seconds. No analysis, no self-criticism, just awareness and delay. That is enough. This chapter is not about perfection. You will still react sometimes. That is not failure. It is feedback. Every pause strengthens the skill. Every release builds resilience. Every small moment shapes the mind. Self-control is not built by force. It is built by attention. And attention, practiced daily, creates a calm that no circumstance can easily disturb. Chapter 5. Emotional control. Is energy protection? Most people think emotional control is about behavior, about saying the right thing, staying polite, or appearing composed. But emotional control is not primarily social. It is energetic. Every emotional reaction costs something. And when those costs add up, people feel exhausted without knowing why. Energy is spent long before words are spoken. It is spent the moment you mentally engage with something that does not truly matter. It is spent when you replay conversations in your head. It is spent when you argue internally, even if nothing is said out loud. This is why some days feel draining even when nothing bad happens. Your energy is being leaked through constant emotional engagement. I once had a friend who was always tired. Not physically, but mentally. He slept enough, and he exercised. From the outside, his life seemed balanced, but every interaction seemed to leave him slightly depleted. When we talked, I noticed something. He reacted to everything, not outwardly, but internally. A comment would trigger analysis. A disagreement would turn into a silent debate. A small inconvenience would stay with him for hours. He believed he was simply thoughtful. In reality, he was constantly spending energy on things that did not deserve it. This is one of the most overlooked aspects of self-control. Not every stimulus deserves your attention, and attention is where energy flows. When you react emotionally, even in your own mind, you are giving energy to that moment. You are feeding it, and once fed, it grows. This is why emotional reactions feel consuming. They pull you into them. Calm people are not people who care less. They are people who are selective. They choose where their energy goes. Emotional control begins with recognizing that energy is finite. You do not have unlimited capacity to engage with everything. Every time you react, you're making a trade. You're giving energy to one thing instead of another. Most people make these trades unconsciously. They give energy to frustration instead of focus. They give energy to irritation instead of presence. They give energy to proving a point instead of peace. Over time, this creates chronic fatigue, not of the body, but of the mind. This is why learning to disengage emotionally is not avoidance. It is protection. One of the most powerful questions you can learn to ask is simple. Is this worth my energy? At first, this question may feel dismissive or cold, but it is neither. It is practical. Your energy determines your quality of life. What you consistently give energy to shapes your mental environment. If you give energy to chaos, you feel chaotic. If you give energy to tension, you feel tense. If you give energy to calm, you cultivate calm. This is not about ignoring responsibilities or suppressing feelings. It is about recognizing when emotional engagement adds no value. I remember a period when I felt constantly on edge. Nothing specific was wrong, but everything felt slightly heavy. When I looked closer, I realized I was emotionally involved in too many things. News, opinions, other people's moods, minor conflicts that had nothing to do with me. Once I began to consciously withdraw energy from these areas, something shifted. Not immediately, but gradually, my baseline state changed. I felt lighter. This is what emotional control does. It lowers your baseline stress. Most people try to manage stress by changing circumstances. They try to fix situations, control outcomes, or avoid discomfort. But much of stress is self-generated. It comes from unnecessary emotional investment. Emotional control teaches you to step back. This does not mean you become indifferent. It means you become intentional. You still care about what matters. You still engage when engagement is meaningful. But you stop reacting by default. One common misunderstanding is that emotional control makes you passive. In reality, it makes your actions more effective. When energy is not wasted on reaction, it becomes available for response. Response is deliberate. Reaction is reflexive. The difference in energy cost is significant. Think about how drained you feel after an argument compared to how you feel after a calm conversation. The difference is not the topic. It is the emotional charge. By learning to reduce emotional charge, you preserve energy. This is especially important in relationships. Many people unknowingly drain each other by engaging emotionally in every minor issue. Over time, this creates resentment and fatigue. Choosing not to react emotionally does not mean you do not address issues. It means you address them without unnecessary intensity. Calm communication uses less energy and creates more clarity. One of the most valuable skills you can develop is knowing when to disengage mentally. Just because a thought appears does not mean it deserves your attention. Just because an emotion arises does not mean it requires action. You are allowed to let things pass. This permission changes everything. When you stop feeding minor irritations, they lose power. When you stop replaying moments, they fade faster. When you stop defending your ego in small ways, your mind rests. Emotional control creates space not just between emotion and action, but between stimulus and attention. That space is restorative. If you want to practice energy protection, begin with awareness. Notice how often you mentally engage with things that do not serve you. Notice how often you replay, rehearse, or resist. Then, gently withdraw. You do not need to force detachment. You simply stop adding fuel. Ask yourself, if I let this go right now, what would I lose? Most of the time, the answer is nothing meaningful. What you gain is clarity, presence, and energy. Over time, this practice changes how you experience life. You are less reactive, not because you suppress emotion, but because you value your energy more than temporary expression. This chapter is about reclaiming that energy, not to become distant, but to become grounded. Not to avoid life, but to engage with it wisely. When you protect your energy, you protect your peace. Chapter 6. Letting go of the need to win. Every moment. One of the fastest ways to lose self-control is the need to win, not in obvious competitions, but in small, everyday moments where the ego quietly demands validation. Being right, being understood, having the last word. These impulses feel harmless, even justified, but they come at a cost. The need to win turns ordinary interactions into internal battles. Most people don't notice how often this need appears. It shows up when someone disagrees with you, when a comment feels inaccurate, when your intentions are misunderstood. The mind reacts instantly, not to clarify, but to defend. and defense consumes energy. I once caught myself arguing with someone online about a topic that had no real impact on my life. The conversation went nowhere. Each response pulled me further in. By the end, I felt irritated, distracted, and strangely empty. Nothing had been gained, but something had been lost. My attention, my calm, my time. This is the hidden cost of needing to win. The ego believes that being right equals safety, that if you don't defend your position, you will be diminished. But this belief is outdated. It belongs to a version of the mind that equates disagreement with threat. In reality, not every disagreement is dangerous. Not every misunderstanding needs correction. And not every moment requires you to prove yourself. Self-control grows when you learn to tolerate being misunderstood. This is uncomfortable at first. The mind wants closure. It wants to correct the record. It wants to restore its image. But when you pause, something important becomes clear. Most situations resolve themselves without your intervention. And even when they don't, your peace is often worth more than being right. I once observed a colleague who embodied this principle without making it obvious. In meetings, his ideas were sometimes overlooked. At times, others took credit for work he contributed to. He noticed everyone did, but he did not rush to defend himself. At first, this looked like passivity. But over time, something interesting happened. People began to trust him more. His calm presence made his words carry weight. When he did speak, he was listened to. He wasn't trying to win every moment. He was playing a longer game. This is one of the most difficult lessons in self-control. The ability to step back without feeling diminished. Letting go of the need to win does not mean you lack confidence. It means your confidence is not dependent on constant validation. This distinction matters. People who need to win are often driven by insecurity, not strength. Their reactions are loud because their inner ground is unstable. Those who can let go are grounded. They understand that dignity is not built through argument. It is built through consistency. One reason the need to win is so strong is that modern life rewards reaction. Fast responses, strong opinions, immediate engagement. Silence is often interpreted as weakness or agreement, but silence can be neither. Silence can be a choice. Choosing not to engage is a form of self-respect. It signals that your time and energy are not available for every provocation. This is especially important in emotionally charged environments. Social media, workplace politics, family dynamics. In these spaces, the urge to win can become addictive. Every response promises relief, a chance to feel justified, a moment of control. But relief gained through reaction is temporary. It fades quickly, leaving restlessness behind. Relief gained through restraint is lasting. This is because restraint preserves your inner stability. It prevents the mind from fragmenting itself across unnecessary battles. Letting go of the need to win requires reframing how you measure success. Instead of asking, "Did I prove my point?" you ask, "Did I protect my peace?" This shift changes your priorities. Winning a moment may feel good briefly, but winning your inner state carries you through the day. Another important aspect of this practice is learning to be okay with unresolved tension. Many people react simply to end discomfort. Silence feels awkward. Disagreement feels incomplete. The mind wants closure. But not all tension needs immediate resolution. Some things settle on their own when left alone. By staying with that tension instead of reacting, you build emotional endurance. This endurance is what makes the mind unbreakable. Not because it never feels strain, but because it can hold strain without collapsing into reaction. If you want to practice letting go of the need to win, start with small situations. Moments where the stakes are low, but the urge is present. Someone interrupts you, someone disagrees casually, someone misunderstands your tone. Notice the impulse to correct or defend. Feel the tension. Then choose not to act on it. This does not mean you never speak up. It means you choose when speaking actually serves you. Over time, this practice changes how you are perceived. People feel less resistance around you. Conversations become lighter. Conflicts lose intensity. More importantly, your mind becomes quieter. The constant need to monitor, defend, and assert begins to fade. In its place, clarity emerges. Letting go of the need to win is not giving up power. It is reclaiming it. You stop scattering your energy across minor battles. You gather it inward. And from that place, your actions become intentional rather than reactive. True strength does not announce itself. It remains calm. Chapter 7. Building an unbreakable mind through repetition. Most people believe change happens when something finally clicks. A realization, a powerful insight, a moment of clarity that transforms everything at once. This belief is appealing because it promises progress without patience. But it is also misleading. An unbreakable mind is not built through insight. It is built through repetition. You can understand self-control deeply and still lose it in the moment. You can agree with every principle in this audiobook and still react when pressure appears. This does not mean you failed to understand. It means understanding alone is not enough. The mind changes through what you repeatedly do, not what you occasionally realize. I once knew someone who consumed books, podcasts, and lectures on emotional mastery. So he could explain the concepts clearly. He could quote ideas about calm, awareness, and discipline. Yet in daily life, nothing changed. He reacted the same way. He felt the same frustrations. He remained stuck. When asked why, his answer was honest. I know what to do. I just don't do it when it matters. That gap between knowing and doing is bridged by repetition. Repetition is not glamorous. It is quiet. It feels slow. It does not provide immediate reward. But it is the only thing that creates reliability under pressure. An unbreakable mind is not one that never struggles. It is one that has practiced responding so many times that the response becomes natural. Think of it like physical training. You do not build strength by understanding exercise. You build it by showing up consistently, even when progress feels invisible. And emotional strength works the same way. Every pause you practice strengthens the habit of control. Every moment you choose not to react reinforces stability. Every time you release tension instead of holding it trains resilience. None of these moments feel dramatic, but together they reshape your nervous system. This is why people often underestimate repetition. The effects are subtle in the short term, but powerful over time. A single choice does little. 100 choices create a new baseline. One of the most important shifts you can make is to stop treating self-control as a test and start treating it as training. A test implies pass or fail. Training implies progress. When you react, it is not proof that you are weak. It is feedback. It shows you where training is still needed. This perspective removes